everyone, I hope you're doing well. You're very welcome to Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that examines lots of different areas of film, the arts and media. I'm your host, Paula Blair, and today I wanted to talk about grant applications. I'm going to try to remember to read my notes slowly and deliberately so that the auto transcription produced by my host Acast has the best chance of keeping up, so that these notes, which I have handwritten, I've jotted these down at various times when I've had a bit of a chance, and usually when I've managed to get out a walk and it's a little bit sunny and I've managed to get some sun. If you know me personally, you'll know I cannot bear the cold and I find it really difficult to regulate my body temperature. So I am basically a lizard who enjoys lying in the sun as much as possible. I've been really congested this past week, but I just thought this was a good opportunity to record this because I've got a quiet house and the street is quiet at the moment, and I just thought I'll just start recording, at least get the first section done. So I want to try and do this quite slowly. You're very free, of course, to speed it up if you want to race through, or you just want to hear me sound like Pinky and Perky or Alvin and the Chipmunks, whichever reference is preferable to you. So then this can be a bit more accessible, hopefully, in case what I talk about proves useful to anyone, and I really hope it will. Before I get into talking about grant applications, I want to give my huge thanks to our awesome patrons on patreon.com/AV Cultures, and a big thanks as well to all of our followers and listeners. As I've been doing every episode lately, we've been getting really lovely feedback, and including a note from my dear friend Richard James Hall, who has been on the show before and is a big supporter. And Dick said that they just wanted to say that the last episode of Audiovisual Cultures was really good, especially for the generous candour. XX. And that was referring to episode 117, where I just checked in with everybody and I talked about how things have been going so far this year. So in a way, this is a bit of a sequel to that. So this is how one of the things I talked about in that turned out, because I mentioned applying for the grant that I'm going to tell you about today that was successful. And I just wanted to share some stuff because it's a rolling grant from Arts Council England that a lot of people apply to every round. So if I can give back and help other people, because there were people who helped me get mine, then hopefully we can just keep that circularity moving and get people more recognition for their work. So those of you who know me personally or follow my personal accounts on the socials, you might know that I've been trying to really take my life and career in hand this year. So I decided that 2022 was the year in which I was determined to make things happen for myself. I was feeling really stagnant about the podcast, and I was feeling very stuck in terms of being able to get a job, have a bit more income, and do something with my skills and knowledge and develop a writing career. And there's been a lot holding me back from all of those things. So I've talked a bit about that in the past. It may well come up again. It's not really going to be the focus of what I want to talk about today. So I suppose it's just giving you a bit of background about where I am and where I've been. I knew going into this endeavour that I needed to prepare myself mentally for a process that would involve a lot of rejection, disappointment and feelings of failure. And so I went into this trying to embrace failure and embrace it just not working out, it just not happening. Inspired very much by Maisie Hill, who I've mentioned before. You know, I'm trying to realise and remember that that doesn't have to mean anything about me if I am rejected from jobs that I apply for. Even though I'm perfectly qualified and I have experience or transferable skills, it doesn't say anything about me as a person if I've tried and it hasn't worked out. And a lot of the times it may just be, I haven't beat the algorithm, because that's how a lot of recruitment searches work now, is our applications are put through programmed algorithms that pick out certain words. And if you don't have those buzzwords that they're looking for, or at least not in the right places, you're going to get chucked out. So they're chucking out perfectly good applications because sometimes a human isn't even reading them. So there's a lot of factors that go into not getting shortlisted for a job. But again, that's not what we're talking about today. But again, part of the broader backdrop of all of this. So something I've been doing to normalise failure is I've been posting to my blog, and that is found at peablair.blogspot.com. And I've been posting on that blog rejected cover letters and supporting statements and project proposals. So this was, I suppose, a form of cathartic release, as well as a way of letting the record show that I tried and that I continue to try in the face of all of that rejection. So I've had some very warm responses to these as well, and it's got me thinking about how dismayed I am that making the effort to attempt good or flowing prose and narratives can't beat the algorithm. And I find it really soulless to try and write statements that might beat the algorithm. So I think that's something I've realised about myself very recently, is that, you know, I need to think about what kind of writer am I, that I feel like I cannot compromise on that anymore. And I've been getting complimented a lot on the very personable way that I try to write, and that is very much what this grant is about, that I'm going to tell you about. So as I mentioned in 117 a few episodes ago, I've been putting more energy into doing what I'm doing as I jot these notes, that is, writing. And that brings me to my good news. So this block of notes I wrote on Thursday, the 2nd of June, and on Monday, the 30th of May, I was notified that my application to Arts Council England's Developing Your Creative Practice grant scheme was successful. Now, this episode is releasing in late July, when I should be in my research phase, but as I write, I haven't told very many people, and it's been a real flurry of activity to get the paperwork sorted, to secure the money, and get booking onto training courses and ordering books, because it started this week. I'm recording this first block of what I want to say in this episode on Friday the 10th of June, and I technically started my grant period on Wednesday. So I've done my first 2 days, and really it's 2 days a week up until the end of February. So I basically have a part-time job until the end of February at this point. But I still haven't got the money through, but it was just one of the courses that I'm doing started on Thursday, yesterday. So I just got started with the whole thing this week. I should stress that this is not a huge grant. But the point of this scheme is to buy yourself time and get skilled up. It's how are you going to step up your practice? It's with the intention of leading to your career development. It's basically the time, the money and the space to really push through and step up with your career development. What that means for me is it covers fees for some specific types of writing course, fees to pay people for me to interview and to get mentoring from, and it will give me the fees for my time spent developing these skills and then moving into testing out the writing practice I want to develop. And that writing practice is a creative critical practice that combines life writing, art writing, and creative non-fiction. So it's really space to experiment with those and see if I can develop a book manuscript from that kind of blend of things. Because you know me, I can't just do one thing. As we were talking about in the previous episode with Jordan Lamb, everything's connected, and for me things are very fluid and borderless, so that's exactly what my writing is going to be. It's going to be from a personal perspective, but I still want it to have robust research and criticism and analysis, but also to be accessible creative non-fiction as well. I want people to want to read it, to enjoy reading it, to be enthralled in the narrative, and to produce something that gets people excited about art. And if it's people who wouldn't normally engage with art and culture, even better. So there's quite big aims and intentions there. So this is going to be, as I say, 2 days a week until February. So I've got 2 days a week paid work until the end of February, which is a massive relief. As I was saying earlier, I've made this really concentrated effort over the past 6 months or so, really since late 2021, to apply for jobs and funding. And the two things that have come of all of the many things I've applied for, while they're not a living or earning me enough to have financial freedom, in a fuller sense, it is a bit of breathing space, and they're both to do with writing, and they're things that I really feel enthused about. I'm really excited about them. So that feels good, and I don't feel so bad about the rejections, because I have to be brutally honest about those things. My motivations are always flawed when I apply for certain jobs, and these are the sorts of things I really want to do, but it's just a real pity that they're not taken seriously enough, that there's actual proper paid work, especially if you're trying to transition from a career path that just didn't quite go where you imagined it might, and you're trying out something different. It feels really difficult to do that, and I and a lot of my friends have done this, and it really hasn't been easy. And I think mine is quite directionless, because I can only ever be a freelancer from this. But again, I digress. That will happen quite a lot, so bear with me. As a side note, I had been applying to select academic positions. I wasn't applying for every job on the market like I had done before, but select places. There were only certain places I would be prepared to go to. Doing that, and that wasn't all I was applying for. I was trying other things as well, but I just didn't have the precise experience that anybody was looking for to give me a chance, and I hadn't done any volunteer work in those sectors, at least not for quite a long time. I just didn't have the experience that they wanted. They wanted somebody, I think very often it's not necessarily that they wanted, it's that people who have the experience they're looking for apply, and so you don't get a look in. One of the rejections I had was really lovely and it showed me that a human being had actually read my application and appreciated the thought that I put into it, and that felt really good, whereas all the other rejections I've had have just been from HR and just the same form rejection that everybody's getting. Some of them coming through at midnight at the weekend, which is really unprofessional. Universities, stop doing that to people. It's not that I'm pulling it through at that time, but it's just I can see what time it's sent at. That's not okay. Working hours, please. This is why there's a massive crisis in academia at the minute, because you're treating people like machines. Doing that, applying for those academic positions and failing very miserably at it, it showed me why I wanted to embrace rejection and failure and think of it more as ruling things out for me and making that decision for me, so that I wouldn't pine for it anymore. I wouldn't be going, what if? I feel very firmly that you need to apply for stuff because you 100% won't get it if you don't apply. And then if you apply and you don't get it, well, that's your decision made for you. There's nothing else you can do about that. And you know where you stand, because it's when you're young and you're trying to date and you're trying to ask people out, and it's such a brave thing to do, is to ask somebody out. Again, that's something I never had very much success at, but it's good because I would spend ages pining over somebody and imagining that they were feeling the same about me, and they never were. And how many people who actually were interested in me was I ignoring because I was pining over somebody else who really didn't want me in that way? And it's better to just know I mean, fantasizing's fine, but it's better to just know where you are and things like that so that you can just move on and get on with something else and stop wasting your time. We're so limited. You know, again, listening to Maisie Hill and her Period Power podcast has been really helpful in helping me, I suppose, firm up those ideas. I knew that I should be thinking like that, but I wasn't practicing it properly. And I think listening to her has really urged me to do that properly. Because apart from anything, I'm 37, I'm too old to pine over things. And, you know, I've done enough mourning for the life that didn't turn out to be for me. You know, it's time to just get on with what is for me and get on with finding that. You know, so with academia as well, there's a lot of troubling stuff going on, and it is a profession that is harming people. One way or another, it is harming people. I'm a survivor of that harm, and I know of folk who didn't make it, and they didn't make it in the most heartbreaking of ways. You know, and I have other people in my life who are also survivors who have also been transitioning away from it. It is like coming out of an abusive relationship. It just takes a lot of time to work it out of your system and find another way, especially when, if you were like me, you really made a go of it. You wanted that as your life and your career, and you threw yourself into identifying yourself in that way. It's a lot to let go of. It really is. So I don't say any of this lightly at all, but I do feel that I'm done and that I have something else to offer, that I have other things that I can find contentment in, because that really does matter so much more than the job. And that means I'm even more happy to have been offered this grant. It really means a lot. It's really validating. It gives me permission to try something that I didn't believe for the longest time was open to me to try. That's why I wanted to take time to talk through this, in case anyone who listens regularly or who stumbles upon this out there on the internet, this is for you. This is to try and communicate to people that you can feel that maybe those opportunities can be for you too, or that you can dare to try, even when you don't really believe that, because you 100% won't get it if you don't try. So I want you to feel like you can and you should just try. Just give it a try. What are you going to lose? You gain a chance that something might happen. I also wanted to talk through my experience of this application process, in case any of the tips and the approaches to applying for a grant could be useful more broadly. So this is going to be really specific to Arts Council England and this particular fund, the DYCP fund. That is quite a personal fund. It's primarily for individuals or maybe very, very small groups. It's to develop your practice, and it's a small grant. It's between £2,000 and £10,000. But I will try to generalise as much as I possibly can, in case the advice is transferable wherever you are. A lot of this advice is also coming from the very generous people who put their own experiences online and who attended support and discussion sessions and contributed their own experiences. So much of what I'm going to tell you is not just coming from me, it's coming from a really wide range of people who've been really generous and shared this, and so I'm trying to share it as well, because the more of us that can be successful, the better for the arts. This is better for us all if more of us can access these things. So although getting awarded the grant is my achievement, I did take advice from many sources, and that level of preparation and generous sharing was key to my first time success. I mean, that is a point in itself. When I say first time, I mean it's the first time I completed the submission. This is important because my first point is that the application needs to be led by a genuine idea It needs to be something that you are doing or that you want to be able to do, something you have an idea for already, and that you can't make that step without the help of the Arts Council or whoever the funding body is. In autumn 2020, very long backstory to this, I wanted to apply for a much more ambitious project grant from Arts Council England, and I designed a podcast series specifically to apply for that. Now, the idea was and is good. It's a solid idea, it could still be done. But I ran it past a few people and they thought it would be really excellent. They thought it was a great idea, it really had legs, and I should go for it. But when it came to the crux, my motivation was wrong. I was doing it as an attempt to make paid work for myself, and it wasn't necessarily work my heart was truly in. Also, the things I budgeted around kept changing, and the people I wanted to involve also had dramatic changes in circumstances. And one person actually died of COVID, and another became debilitatingly ill. So then mentally, I wasn't in a good place to overcome and keep pivoting every time something else happened. It felt more and more frivolous, and it felt more and more futile because people I wanted to involve just weren't there anymore in the saddest possible ways. And this was a dear friend as well, so it was quite a tough time anyway, and it was best to step back and just give it a bit of time. I made the decision to leave it, and in 2021 I moved increasingly towards working on myself, both in terms of my health and professionally. I just felt increasingly that I couldn't be part of a team and properly contribute or lead when I'm broken and I was feeling unrest. So that's what I did. I took some time out, kept up the podcast, I kept up momentum on this show, but otherwise, and I've tried to do bits of writing, but I think even that went by the wayside in late 2021. And by the end of that year, I was better at going, okay, you need to set clear boundaries and communicate them, because I think this has been a big problem with me, is that I haven't been clear enough about my own boundaries, even to myself. And that can lead to you feeling like people are walking all over you and taking advantage, when sometimes you need to look at your own behaviour and think, well, you said to that person, yeah, sure, just give me a shout, I can help, I'm happy to help. And then when they take you up on that, it's just they take you up on that more than you anticipated and more than you actually felt comfortable with. You got annoyed with them, and you have to think, that's not really fair, because you're the one who said, yeah, sure, and then just expected them to know what was too much. That's not really fair. So I think communication is really the key there. And even being clear in myself, and anticipating, if that becomes too much, I'll get cranky, I'll get annoyed at somebody who really doesn't deserve it. That's just not okay, that's not fair. So it's I think just self-evaluation, self-awareness is really important. And I felt that the only person who could take any of that in hand was me. It was down to me to sort that out. It's no one else's responsibility. And I started writing again, and I have been, without really realising it, what I've been doing is attempting radical honesty. Maybe that's too much, I don't know, but I suppose I've just been trying to be honest in my writing, even when that means confronting something potentially unpleasant about myself. Because I think in doing that, I'm not putting myself down, it's not being self-deprecating, it's a way of, I suppose, learning to empathise with yourself as an imperfect being, and then hopefully you can empathise with other humans who are also imperfect. We're all just battling through, not really knowing how to get this humaning thing right. I fell in love with art again and I leaned into that. And a big part of that was the Turner Prize show, to be honest. The whole show. So not just the shebeen, not just Array Collective, but I think the whole show. It was a real celebration of creativity and possibility and working together and community. So I think that really helped. Just sparked me up again, got me on my way, inspired me to start writing again. So I really leaned into what I enjoy, what I take comfort from. I started tracking my menstrual cycle so that I could learn what to expect from my moods and my energy levels and how they're likely to affect my brain and my thinking. And I am getting better at saying no, I'm not happy about that, and being more discerning about what I say yes to and what the terms of that yes might be. Something I've done, it seems like quite a small thing, but it's actually really changed the game for me. I embraced increasingly automated systems, so my brain energy isn't as taken up by draining amounts of admin that I'm not really getting paid for. You know, I've been guesting on other podcasts and I've been nicking ideas from how they deal with their guests. So I've been using Calendly finally to arrange appointments. It's amazing how powerful it feels to just block off loads of time. Say, none of those days are appropriate, none of those times are appropriate. If you want to negotiate something because we're dealing with a time zone, okay, but it is just sending a message of I can't be doing with millions of emails back and forth. So all the information is in that kind of stuff. By doing things like that and with help from other places, I got myself into a better mindset and a place of much more, as I say, radical honesty and really confronting myself, and not in a self-abusing way, in a very realistic way. Basically what we say in Ulster of having a word with yourself, it's just, you know, I'm catching myself on is what I've been doing. And that's why I was able to go, right, let's try this. And just be open about trying stuff and seeing how it went. There's nothing left to lose. I've been mucking about with different approaches to art writing and self-writing for a really long time. Getting on for 15 years now, but in some ways maybe a lot longer than that. And I've always wanted it to be accessible because my learning about art and artists' film wasn't always accessible. In fact, a lot of it was outright combative. And I think this is something I talked about with Robert Simpson. I've done a couple of things with him on my own YouTube channel. There's an in conversation between us, and I'm pretty sure we talked about this specifically in the episode of Cinepunked I did with Robert about Maya Darren. I think we talked about our film education and a specific person who taught us artist cinema, who was a great person, a great academic, terrible teacher. That's the sort of inspiration I had. I don't know what it is, what you call it when you're inspired to do it the opposite way of somebody, but that was what I tried to do in my teaching, was everything that person didn't do. You know, and I feel very strongly that art and creativity should be for everyone, not the elite few who get to determine tastes and fashions and the buzzwords. I want to make accessible to others what was not accessible to me, what did not feel accessible to me as somebody from a disadvantaged working class background who was never in the habit of going to art galleries before the age of about 22 or something. And even after that, even when I was doing a PhD on a lot of that stuff, I still didn't feel fully welcome in these spaces, or that I was allowed to be in them. And I don't want people feeling that way about the arts. I think they should be for everyone. It has taken a while for me to believe this is possible, and a few good friends have been fundamental in convincing me of that. My dear friends Sylvia Grace Borda and Twy Miller have been championing me and my work for years. They're not the only ones, but these two in particular, I think over the past couple of years, have just been very quietly behind the scenes, checking in on me and just supporting my work in certain ways, and loads of you have been really, really supportive in lots of different ways. I think the way they've been doing it has meant a lot, and I'm not sure that they know that, so I just wanted to put it out there. You know, Sylvia in the past few years has got me work through essay commissions, and she's boosted me with catch-ups over Skype, working with an 8-hour time difference because she's out in British Columbia. Twy has been amazing in encouraging my creativity. I paraphrased her actually in my Arts Council application when I told them that a compliment I get for my writing is that it's as if I'm sitting telling it to you over a cuppa. And that makes me feel so warm inside, and I want all of my writing to come across that way, as if I'm sitting having a natter with you. If I'm to develop a style, it should be that. That's what I intend to do. That's what I am experimenting with all the time. Because when we're relaxed, we can enjoy things, and learning and sharing ideas should be enjoyable. And I think it should be joyous. There's so little to be positive about in the world at the moment. It is terrifying out there. There's awful things happening, terrible conflicts, and rights are being stripped away that were hard fought for. And it is scary out there, you know. There's people fighting with each other on the internet about a couple they don't personally know, whose lives have just been laid bare for the world. And they're more concerned with that than so much else, like so much social injustice that's happening, and it's pretty upsetting to me. You know, I just want this to be enjoyable, joyous, to feel contentment, but dealing with difficult topics, but it doesn't have to be in a way that makes people feel guilty about everything all the time, or is trying to cause a fight. Or I want it to be rooted in empathy and compassion, if we can do that. And maybe that's from the specific context that I'm coming from, you know, where I've dealt with such complex cases of victim-perpetrator dichotomies in the same person, and I know how complicated things get. So I really try not to be judgmental. And I do stress the try part, because I don't always get this right. I am human. So that's what I'm aiming to do, is that kind of writing practice, and I aim to hone and develop that over the coming months. But let's get on to the successful bit, because I've blathered on a lot and haven't even really properly started yet. I'm specifically developing a creative critical non-fiction writing practice with a view to producing a book manuscript. My topic is one I've been working on gradually since 2017. So it's been a slog to get to this point, and inspiration from my friend, the novelist and playwright J.A. Mensah, who, when I told her about using my blog to draft work that I'd polish and refine for academic publication later, asked astutely, why does it have to be academic? What if the personal voice and transparency about your research journey is your voice and will be more fun and accessible to read? That has been working on me, Juliana, since November 2019. You know, so that's really what I was doing. That's what I was working on when I was doing all those blog posts about Treasures from the Wreck of the Unbelievable. But then, of course, 2020... the enormity of the pandemic took its toll, and the strain of lockdowns took their toll, and I ran out of steam, and it felt very frivolous in the face of so much collective trauma. My freelance work dried up that year as well, and the anxiety about that was really awful. It was really a lot to overcome. Personally, for me, this was all a really slow burn. I had looked into Arts Council funding for podcasting before, as I've said, and the hoops were stringent, and I felt disingenuous, as I explained. I read carefully what you could apply for, and then earlier this year, I read up more carefully what you could apply for when going for developing your creative practice. And it being a small grant, I figured that it would be a lot more manageable and attainable, because this fund is all about the creator and it's not about a project. It can work towards a project, you can produce something out of it, but it is about stepping up your skills and taking risks to expand what you do. And this is really key. Understand the fund you're applying for and make sure you're eligible. A fundamental part of this scheme is identifying why you and why now, and that needs to be genuine and it needs to be convincing. For me, I was at a point where I couldn't get myself any further on my own. I need access to training and resources and paid time to experiment without the anxiety of not earning money and feeling like the work was a luxury too far. I feel like an absolute freeloader, which I've probably mentioned before. I feel like an absolute freeloader and I'm not happy about it. Again, this money coming through, it validates me, it gives me a part-time job for the next lot of months. So now I feel like I can settle into just doing the work because it is getting paid. It feels legitimate. This point is important as well. You need to make sure that you and anyone else you're involving is paid fairly. Okay, not just paid a fee, and a fee that actually works out at less than minimum wage. Okay, the point of this is that people get paid properly for their labour. I'm not meaning to slight people who've managed to get me a fee for some writing commissions. I am very grateful for those, you know I am, but let's all be honest here. Sometimes the amount I get isn't even a day rate for something that's taken a couple of weeks to put together, or maybe it's something that I worked on for a couple of months, an amount of money that wouldn't even cover rent. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about. This is proper paid time. Now, this fund is public money. It is provided by the government. So you have to show why the work is important and can only be funded by that fund, by that scheme, by that council, by that funding body. So Arts Council England are very clear that they also need in turn to show central government how much work and value the arts have. Okay, so this isn't just for us, this is for them too, this is for all of us in the arts. We have to show the value of the arts in doing this. We have to fight for their case. And so making sure that you have a good and realistic fee for your own labour is really paramount. That's in their own guidance as well. You should be getting paid fairly and getting paid well for your work. This is a tough one to figure out and I really needed help with this. Initially, I figured a £50 day rate would be fine at 2 days a week. That's what I arrived at when I was working out 8-hour days on the real living wage, rounded up a bit. I had seen this on an example of a successful bid that was shared online. I think I found it on the White Pube. They have great resources if you're applying for funding, and I highly recommend having a look at their website about just all the stuff that they're doing. They're doing great work. So I thought that rate seemed fair if somebody else had arrived at the same conclusion. However, Leila Darrenville, who runs the Northeast Cultural Freelancers Facebook group and is an all-round force of nature in Northeast cultural spheres. She hosted a really informative discussion on Zoom. There were only 6 of us there, but it was so useful and supportive. During that, Leila was firm that you must ask for your worth as well as asking for what you need. And she made the suggestion, which I took on board, to have separate day rates depending on what kind of work you're going to be doing. So for example, my day rate for the research and training phases of my grant timeline are more modest, but more than the minimum I was previously allocating for myself. And then my writing and editing rate is much higher than the training rate, because that's when I'm going to be applying the new skills and actually working towards a book manuscript. I'm going to have a lot more knowledge under my belt. I'll have been practicing. I'll have been really butching up these skills. So I will command a higher rate at that point. And I think that's something you can't be behind the door about. You have to know that you will command that rate. You will command this money. And I think as well, in my case, to be just direct about this, I think given my academic and publishing experience already, I think I already should command a higher rate. But people see you as just starting out. It's just you haven't done that particular mode of the thing before, or very much. My writing and editing skills are already strong. They're just taking a different direction, and what I've been playing with for a long time is really stepping up and becoming formalised and much more polished, I think. When you're budgeting, look into and ask around about day rates for certain skills and tasks so you don't sell yourself short while remaining realistic. You can't ask for astronomical amounts. It has to be a decent day rate. Or maybe you'll want to do an hourly rate or whatever. Just the day rate was a lot simpler and it was easier to work out the weeks and to do it part-time in case anything else worked out, and then I'd still be able to do it but just pivoting a bit. So you do need to give yourself the time to really plan. If you find text useful with your podcasts, we've got 2 options for you. You can subscribe to Audiovisual Cultures podcast on YouTube for captioned videos, and you can visit audiovisualcultures.com and click the transcripts tab. Both sites are linked in the show notes, along with information about this episode. So I'm doing this next part a few days later. It's now Monday the 13th of June. I'm still waiting for my money to come through. I've had no notification that anything's gone wrong, so now it's just a matter of waiting for the money. So it's quite an anxious time because it doesn't quite feel real yet until I actually have it, but there we go. So the next point I wanted to talk you through was looking and asking around. Is really important to get a general sense of doing the application and putting it together, but also specifically in completing each statement that you need to make. So depending on the type of fund that you're going for, you're going to have to break things down. A mistake I made when I was doing my the initial one I tried to go for, which was a project grant, I wrote quite a big 2-page proposal, and that is not how you submit your information. It's all quite broken up and divided into separate sections. There's no point in actually writing out a beautiful essay or a prose proposal on what you want to do with all the information in it, because it's too much to unpick it all. With Arts Council England, they tend to ask you things in separate categories, so you have to submit individual answers for specific questions, and you're probably going to have a word limit on that, and it can be quite constrictive. So that's why it's worth really looking around and really taking as much advice as you can, because I was fully prepared for the biddiness of it all. And any funding body that you're applying to should provide guidance, and Arts Council England does provide quite thorough guidance for filling in its forms. And as I've said before, people are very generous at posting up redacted copies of their submission, and I will do that at some point in the future with mine. You have to think about this, that the funding body wants to give you the money, but you as the applicant have to convince them that you're eligible and that you need it, and that you need it from them. I reiterate, it really ought to be a genuine project or a goal that you really want to work towards. You can't really just play supermarket sweep when planning your budget. You really need to plan it out very carefully. It needs to be things that you actually need and at properly researched costs. You can't just round everything up to the nearest. For example, I'm doing a course, one of the courses I'm doing costs £129. You can't round that up to 130 or 150 or something like that. Put the actual cost of it in there for them so that they know exactly what you need. And then, as I mentioned, check with the funding, check with whatever it is you're going for. But I've put in a very modest contingency fund just in case prices went up before I was able to book. But that may well be money that you end up not getting at the end, or you have to give back or something if it's not used. You have to be really genuine and upfront about that. So in my case as well, with researching my costs, there are 2 writing courses that I'm going to be doing that very clearly map onto the practice that I'm developing. And I probably could have done a lot more. It's just these were the only 2 where the timing worked out well. There were others I found, and they were happening before the decision date for the grant. So I couldn't include those because they were happening after I would even find out whether I'd get the grant or not. And you can't backdate things and use that to pay for something you've already done, because the whole point is that I can't afford to do this just myself. I need the money to pay for it, so I've already started one of those courses and I'm now really short because it started before the money's come through, but the money's coming, so I can manage for a couple of weeks. And these courses, it's not just learning about the subject, but it's also that they give me a bit of community, because I'm going to have classmates and I'm going to have an instructor, a teacher on each of those. So I'll have some guidance and mentoring, even if it's just for that specific period of time or for that specific practice, but it's a really good way of getting mentoring in a very structured way, where you can also test it out as well, because then I'm not really having to go and find somebody to be a specific mentor for me, but I'm getting some kind of mentoring and feedback, which is good, in a structured way, and not necessarily just from the instructor, but from peers as well. For me as well, there are also specific people that I want to interview, and I've given a clear justification for who those people are, and I've allocated a generous day rate to offer to them, and then that's where my contingency comes in as well. So if I offer somebody a particular rate and they say I'll do it for, and if I have enough budget for that, then maybe I can agree to that. So you really do need to take the time to research and think through and think what is fair, what is a fair rate to pay people. So it's good to look around at what's a good rate to pay for someone's expertise as well as your own. You really do need time to research and think through all of these aspects. And when you're clear on them, you can write stronger proposal statements and build your narrative that will convincingly address the why you and why now questions in this specific fund. For the DYCP fund, and likely many others, I had to ask someone for a letter of support to submit with my application. One of the participants in the Northeast Creative Freelancers call I talked about earlier had previously had a successful bid and really generously shared their letter of support. And they stressed that it was from an organisation, and it was an organisation that the Arts Council also part funds on a regular basis. And the letter that was submitted was on the organisation's headed letter paper. Lucky, but it's part of the narrative as well, I suppose. I was in a good position to be able to do something quite similar, because I was able to ask someone who is both a friend of mine but is somebody who had actually commissioned me to do something for an Arts Council funded project that they'd had before, and then they were really happy because they were happy with my work on that. And we've got a really good relationship, and we've got a really nice sort of working friendship as well as an actual friendship. And they were really happy to write the letter to endorse me on behalf of their organisation. So do really think about what networking you've already done, what organisations or people or businesses or whatever it might be, who do you already have that you've got a good relationship with? And if you haven't got any of that, where can you build one? Where could you start to network and introduce yourself to people and be a presence so that you can try and build that up and make yourself known to people so that they'll be really happy to endorse you with this kind of letter, and if it's relevant to the thing you're applying for, then that's so much the better. This was something that my person could say as well, is that they were looking forward to being able to work with me again, and that this would open out the possibility for us doing a lot more workshops together because I'll have all this training and I'll be able to pass that on to other people. So that was a really big bonus, is that yes, it's all about me, but then is there another step to it? When it comes to writing your own statements for the application, follow to the letter the guidance provided and look for relevant examples online of this. I really can't stress that enough. It doesn't have to be worded perfectly. It needs to be really clear what you're talking about. There needs to be a very clear narrative of what it is you're doing and a very clear justification, very clear logic to what you're doing. So for Arts Council England, the White Pube website has great resources. And if you do an internet search, there are quite a few individuals who'll share theirs in redacted form on their own websites and blogs. That's something I'm planning to do as well for mine. And I might even offer mine to the White Pube as well. So do seek out those sorts of things, but also check YouTube because there's a lot of really helpful videos. Funding bodies like Arts Council England are actively trying to be more inclusive and they do want people to win the money. So Arts Council England has a channel full of video resources. A lot of them have text, talking, images, closed captions, and there are versions with British Sign Language as well. So they're really trying to be as inclusive as possible. And they also need to make the case to the government that we should be awarding more. So do take their advice because they're the ones who are then talking directly to the government and convincing them that this is what people are capable of if you give them these grants. These are the positive things that can come of it. Use direct, clear language, write like a human. It's fine to do short, direct sentences. That's actually really ideal because there should be no ambiguity. There should be nothing left for them to have to just figure it out for themselves. It should be absolutely clear what you're saying. And remember to explain things and do it concisely, but do explain things that might be niche. And don't take for granted someone else's knowledge of something or their understanding on the part of the people who are assessing your application. Don't assume they know everything about what you're talking about. You need to explain it to them, but in a way that just gets them up to speed and it's clear why it's important. And do always try to get someone, preferably someone with maybe some application experience and success, but just really anyone at all that you can get to do it, to have a look over what you've written and make sure it's really clear. If they have questions or if they think of something that you might want to add, then that's really good process. You need to address those things. If there are gaps, if something's left not fully explained, or if they think of something that you haven't thought of yourself. I shared my drafts with the person I asked to provide my supporting statements, and they made really great suggestions just to strengthen certain points and be even more convincing, so it was a really useful process. So I was sharing my draft work so that they were up to speed on what it was I was applying for, but also they were able to feed back and say, I know you might be up to your word limit, but can you add this in? Because I think that would really strengthen this particular point. And then I would go and I'd fiddle with something. I'd say, right, what words here are non-essential? And that's how I would do it. And I would just find a bit of space, even if it was just to be able to put 4 words in to more clearly express something. Were there 4 words elsewhere that were expendable? What adjectives just didn't need to be there, for example. Now, with this specific grant, with developing your creative practice, and it could likely apply to any kind of creative grant that you have, it's probably the case with just about any creative grant, you need to supply a sample of your work or a sample of your portfolio. And so this needs really careful consideration. What are you going to show them? What best prepares them for what it is you intend to do with the money? Now, because this fund is about developing your creative practice, you need to show that you're both already going in that direction, but that something's preventing your progression. And so the samples ought to indicate, as well as back up, your claims that you're ready to step up and only need the right support and resources that only that funder can provide to you. So if you're someone who has financial freedom and you can just go and buy your supplies and go and do the courses, this fund is not for you. It's for people who are prevented from being able to just do that. It's for people who are able to demonstrate, look, I'm on the pathway to this, but I'm really stuck because of financial reasons, because of health reasons, because of other stuff going on in my life. I need this support. And this is another point I was told. The funder needs to feel needed. This was something I was advised. I think it was Leila who advised this. You can only do it because of them. And now again, that still needs to come from an honest place. It has to be genuine, that it really can only be from them if you're going to go down that road, if you're going to make that kind of claim. As I say, if you're independently wealthy, you need not apply, because these funds are for people who just can't do it by themselves, regardless. And it is based on need and demonstrating that need. Additionally, this will be different from other funds, but the Developing Your Creative Practice grants do not expect a finished product. They're not about producing something. There's no end product. The end product is that you have increased your skills and your knowledge and your ability to work. That is the end point. It is preparing you for being able to go on and produce a piece of work that you couldn't have done without this opportunity. So if you have a goal for what you want to achieve from the development period, in my case, it's a book manuscript and an idea of publishing options, plus the ability and the confidence to pass my training and knowledge on to others, then absolutely do state that. But it's not a requirement. You're not required to have that all figured out yet. So whatever kind of funding you're applying for, be really clear on any outcome demands that the funding body has. What is contingent on you getting the money? And be clear on what you'll need to, at the very least, report on, because even for a fund like this, you need to produce a report at the end of it to get the last 10% of the funds. And it's okay to fail. I think failure is fine, because the whole point of DYCP is that you experiment and you test things, and the whole part of that process is that you can fail at that and then maybe find your direction. So as far as I'm aware, it's fine and completely encouraged to report on anything like that. It's best to be really upfront about how things have gone and where you are by the end of the funding period. But this includes where things haven't gone to plan, and that should be okay as long as you're transparent about that and that you've done what you could. Maybe a course didn't turn out the way you thought it was going to, or maybe life happened to you and you couldn't write as much as you thought you were going to be able to. There's a particular person I want to interview. I don't know if I'll be able to track that person down and if they'll consent to that. So that might be part of my project that fails, and I am going to try everything I can, but I'm open to that not working out. And this is another quick point about the budgeting. I've mentioned before that I've added a small contingency fund because prices could increase. I may need more books than I'd planned for, because maybe there are course books for the courses I'm going to do that I don't know about yet, and that has happened. I bought 2 more books than I'd planned to because they were suggested by the course that I'm currently doing. But I'm actually under budget because I bought the books from a second-hand place rather than brand new. So I've managed to save a bit of budget, and then I have a bit more for books and stationery than I'd originally planned. So I can treat myself to some really nice notebooks because I actually am low on notebooks, so that'll be handy. For any unplanned travel as well, because at the minute I haven't planned in any travel because I can do any part of this work I can do remotely. I've gone for online courses. The people I want to interview or get mentoring from, we should be able to do everything via Zoom, for example. But maybe some travel will come up because what if the person I want to interview wants to do it in person? So that might involve travel for one or both of us, and that'll be on me. So I think as long as it's modest, as long as it's not a wild amount of money, for me, maybe I went too modest. I asked for just £100 for a buffer, and that might not even turn out to be enough. But I can pay somebody out of my own fee if I need to by the end if it's not enough. Now, I suppose we may get into the fun part, the submission process, submitting your prepared application. Arts Council England uses an online submission portal called Grantium. I can't speak for others, but what I can tell you is that this particular form is user unfriendly. Sorry, Arts Council, but it is true. It is not an easy process. Even if you're quite techy, the user interface is very counterintuitive a lot of the time and quite challenging to navigate. I think because of the language that's used isn't necessarily that intuitive, so it can take a bit of digging around and consulting guidance for how to use it to really find your way properly with what to do. So it is really quite complex and it is not self-explanatory. That's just an example. Whatever it is you're applying to, whoever you're applying to, give yourself plenty of time to submit, to go through the submission process. I spent a few weeks gradually preparing and redrafting my application statements and documents. And then when I came to submit, it took me over 2 hours to get everything in and done properly. It wasn't just a matter of copying and pasting everything in. There were ways of inputting information that were unexpected. There was just a lot to have to figure out as you went and to double check and make sure you got everything in the right place and all of this. And I was warned, I had been advised that it could be quite tricky. So I submitted mine the day before the deadline, and that meant I had heaps of time and I wasn't panicked. I really would advise against leaving it up to the wire. You should make sure you've got heaps of time so that you don't miss the deadline, because just about everywhere I think is going to be really strict about that. So whatever system you're going to have to use, try to find people to talk to who have prior experience of it and be as prepared as you can be for any eventuality. So for mine, I had to have a mapped out plan of action that was very clear and timed and dated. And it doesn't have to be rigid and it can change, but there should be really clear phases and a timeline that makes sense. So it should show how you're planning to progress through your funding period. On the Grantium form, this takes quite a while to fill in because you're doing all the little bits individually. You can't just upload your spreadsheet or your table that you've made for yourself. You have to fill it in, and in their specific way of filling it in, which can take a bit of getting used to. You have to look up what terms apply to the type of thing that you're inputting, because they have a maybe different way of wording what it is that you're doing. So it's not as simple as, so for example, my resources that I was asking for, the books and a bit of money for stationery, that would come under assets to them. So you need to look up what are all these titles that they're giving for things. and what comes under that. What of my stuff is relevant to that, and you really do need to get it accurate. So take the time to look at the guidance that's provided, to look at what all counts for each term. So this can all take quite a while to fill in, but it will be easier if you have made tables or a spreadsheet for yourself. As an example again, I have a research and training phase, then a research and networking phase, followed by a further training and practice phase, and then a time to write phase, culminating in mentoring and feedback. Some of this is determined by the timing of the courses that I'm doing. So one of them is happening really quickly, and then another one isn't until late October. So that's why I'm a bit back and forth with the training. It's coming in waves rather than in a chronological order in a way. But around those, I've really carefully worked it all out so that it should get me where I aim to be from June until February. Budget planning here is also essential. So I spoke earlier about working out good fees for yourself and anybody who's involved. Be sure about what it's fine for you to ask for, and again, make a spreadsheet that calculates all that and do it to the penny, do it to the pound. And I stress again, only ask for things that you actually genuinely need and are eligible for. Depending on the fund, you're not going to simply get a new laptop out of it, and they typically won't cover anything that you already have or pay for personal use or other work that you do. It must be a necessity that is specific to the project. The budget can also be a bit bewildering to add. In Grantium, you need to state your overall bid amount, then break down costings according to type. You'll need to be clear on what the costing type for each item is, as the language, as I say, can be counterintuitive. The guidance provided by the funding body should have those things explained. Again, do read this properly before and during your preparation and submission. If you're able to access it, I think in the guidance it didn't necessarily tell me exactly what the terms were, and it wasn't till I got to the actual submission form. So again, just be prepared for that. It's going to take a bit of time to just ensure that you've got the right categories for things. An important note is Arts Council England allow for application support. And if you have some sort of hindrance or difficulty in submitting your application and require access support throughout your project, it is fine to add those. For other funders, do check their information on those sorts of things. I can't tell you much more beyond that this just exists, because other than some confusion and mild swearing at the computer while I was submitting, I managed to submit fine by myself. But if you're, for example, visually impaired, dyslexic, or have a disability that prohibits you from undertaking these kinds of tasks by yourself, then you can have somebody help you with it and submit on your behalf. And you can also apply to a separate access fund that's not included in your bid amount. So you could go for a bid that's the maximum amount that they'll award, but on top of that you can also have access requirement funds if you need to pay for someone who can help you with things. It's not paying for a carer, but it's paying somebody who needs to do a lot of the administration for you because you're not able to do it yourself. Or if there's some equipment that you need that will help you with the process, those sorts of things. Now, if like me, you manage to be successful, then congratulations. But the hard work is not over yet. For Arts Council England, definitely, there's still quite a bit of work and admin to do before your money is secured, and a lot you need to prove and be prepared to do. The first step was receiving an email telling me I had a decision. Okay, it didn't tell me what the decision was. That was all it said. I had a decision, so go and sign into Grantium and go and get your decision letter. For me, I saw this when I was in the middle of 2 other things at once, and I just needed to focus on both of those things. So instead of just racing to Grantium like I wanted to, I just knuckled down and I did those other couple of things first. And then when I was finished those and I was ready, I went to Grantium. I struggled to remember how to sign into Grantium. And then I struggled to figure out where this decision letter was hiding. And I fumbled around until I got it open and realised I was being offered the grant. So much excitement. But even when you get good news, they don't make it easy for you to find it. So yeah, even when you've won, it's still quite complex. I had to then go through a workflow with quite a lot of more unclear language and instructions to work through accepting the offer. And then I had to wait for the next 2 steps to become available to me, because then they had to acknowledge and accept my acceptance of my offer. And so then the next day, one of those steps became available, but I needed to complete the other one first. So I kept checking my email. And then the next day it came through, and then I could go and do both. And I got those both things in motion. And that again, it took a bit of time, and you need to again read the instructions carefully. You know, there are things you shouldn't submit in certain places and things you should submit in certain places. So it is a bit stressful just making sure you've got all of this correct. And these were important ones to do with banking and ensuring identity. They had very careful instructions with lots of red text, shouty red text. So even though you're excited and you just want to get it all confirmed and happening, you really need to be calm and patient and careful and okay with going in circles a few times just to make sure you're getting everything right. And as I write this, I am waiting to make sure that it is all right. And then that'll release the first 90% of my funding, of my grant to me. So I'm still, as I record this, waiting for that. I've had no confirm or deny that my bank details were all fine. I'm just waiting for something to happen. So with this grant, again, you get the final 10% on completion, and as long as they're satisfied and they're satisfied with your report, and if there's anything where the money didn't quite get used or anything like that, then you probably won't get that full amount, but just depends how satisfied they are. This is important to be aware of, because if a lot of your grant involves paying other people, then you really ought to make sure you're doing that first and pay yourself last, so my final 10%, I'm planning for that to be just all of the rest of the fees that are owed to me, and I'm going to make sure I pay everybody else that's involved before then. That's really it. So that's as much as I can tell you. I hope it's been useful. I've really thrown quite a lot at you over the past while. There's a lot to get through. And if you have any questions, I'd really encourage you to place them somewhere public if possible. So if you have questions, don't just email me about them. If you could comment on social media posts about this episode or on the YouTube page for this episode, then that would benefit more people. And also we can do some community answering, because there might be other people who have other experiences who might chip in as well. So if we could do that, if we could keep that discussion public, I'd really appreciate that, so that more people can benefit from this and get something out of it, hopefully, as well. This is a very specific grant. It's very specific to me, and it's a very specific process. So if we could all just share, that would be lovely. That would be so great for other people. The notes for this will be on the episode post on audiovisualcultures.com. This is episode 121. If you're needing to search for that, there is a search bar. If you go to the website, there is a search bar. So if you type in 121 grant applications, it should take you straight to the page, I hope. You can also comment and have a discussion on that page as well. There are comments available there too. Now, I really hope this has been useful and informative. All the best with whatever you go for, and please do go for it. The worst that can happen is you'll learn something from the process. So please go for it, and do not think that you can't. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves.